Welcome to the 5 keys of crushing technical debt. And as we said in the title, to bring back joy. So let's get right into it, Julia. I'd love to start out with a hot seat. I would love everybody in the chat to put some things out, but I am going to call on some people randomly as well. This is how we often start our exceptional engineering experience offering, is to put people in the hot seat to get them to think about these things hard right from the start. So why is it so hard to address technical debt? Why do we get it? Why is it hard to fix it? Why is this a bane in our industry? Please put your answers in the chat. But I want to push on people to just say, join the talk. Robert E. Lee, I haven't talked to you in a while, so I'd love to talk to you for a minute. Would you care to join us for a second? I'm muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Hey, Robert, thanks for joining us. And I bet you didn't expect to be in the hot seat today.
Nope.
Do you have any opinions about this?
It seems that our schedule is always so tight. We have to work on the new things. We don't have time to go back on the things that we did at the end of a project just to get it out the door.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great one. Hey, Mike Sweeney, I'm going to call on you to expand what you put in the chat, and then I'm going to call on Mr. Bentel next. Mike Sweeney, go ahead.
Yeah, we got a couple of services. They're transactional services that run great. The code doesn't need to be modified too much because the services don't change and no one wants to touch it, because once you touch it and it breaks, a million alarms go off and, update resume.
Oh, absolutely. Nice one. Robert Bentel. And then I'm going to grab Matt Gruber. Robert Bentel, you're up.
We didn't plan to do it, and it's kind of an admission of failure almost. We don't like saying that we could have done it better last time.
Oh, that's great. So we did it and it was a bit messier. We really should replace it, but nobody wants to talk about it. Thank you, Robert. Matt Gruber.
Yeah, it's hard to justify the value of technical debt to the business side of the house. They also want to see more new product, new features, new development, and saying we want to go back and redo this piece with no visible change is hard to justify.
And I'm going to do one more. I love what Tim Haston had to say. Tim, are you out there? Management wants features.
Yeah, and it's always a fight to get them to let us work on technical debt because they don't see any value in it.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you for the chat. Thank you for that. I love to just keep going, but we're going to push on into our talk now. Julia, next slide.
I'm trying to make this work so I can see the chat, because for some reason this is taking over my whole computer.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to talk about the star of the show. This show is going to be technical debt. And then Julia is going to take over and talk about the 7 types of technical debt. She's going to give you a window into different ways to look at technical debt. And then she's going to introduce the 5 keys to crushing it. And then I'm going to take back over and talk about, hey, even if you understand those 7 and 5, you still have challenges. And we're going to close with what you need to do. Julia, next. So 2 big concepts here, which I usually have a talk about, but I'm just going to tell you. The cost of financial debt is money. Everybody gets that. If you take out a loan, you're going to be paying back extra money. And people know that if you pay off the minimum on a loan every month, it's going to take forever to pay it off. So what is the impact of technical debt to you, to your team, to your organization, to your customer? Most people don't get this, but I'm going to give you the answer. When you take on technical debt, what you're taking on is the debt of time, because everything thereafter takes longer. You're slowing down your speed to value. And besides that economic problem, you're also sucking the soul out of the individual developers and teams, etc. I see Robert's still unmuted. So Robert, have you ever felt that when you're dealing with a technical debt thing that your spirit solely being sucked away by having to deal with that kind of system?
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yes.
yes.
So it's twofold. Really, I've seen more than one person walk away from a job because they couldn't deal with being trapped in the abyss of technical debt. Next slide, please.
I just want to add one point. I promise I won't do this to you every slide. But, you know, a lot of people wrote that the barrier is that management, I mean, you know, management wants new features because they equate features with dollars and they don't equate solving tech debt with dollars. And that's going to be one of the keys that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely will. Next slide.
I'm trying to do it. I'm not good at this.
Okay.
I got it now.
History-wise, you can read this slide later, but basically, the word was invented by Ward Cunningham back in 1992 to try to explain this to management. Now, what he talked about was consciously made technical debt, where you're going to have to fix it very soon thereafter. But if you go to the next slide, you're going to find out that the word technical debt has greatly expanded since the origins. It now means almost anything that slows you down. Intentional debt, unintentional debt, things that change. You're going to see all the examples when Julia covers the 7 types of technical debt. Next slide.
Me.
And, oh, you take here? Okay, go, Julia.
I will start here. So
I'm 30 seconds early, just so you know.
okay, good. I'll take it. So we put together a technical debt assessment. It's available at the link that's on the slide. And I'm going to quickly run through the contents of it, the 7 types of technical debt and the 5 keys to crushing it. And so it's a really great way to just get started. So for today, we don't have much time, so I want to quickly go through the different types just so that we get to cover everything. So the first part of it is to really start to understand what kind of technical debt you have. And so what the purpose of this part is to just really start to understand, where do you look for technical debt in your organization? Where are you likely to find it? And how big a problem is it going to be? So these are types that we came up with that we find often in organizations, and both that we work with and that we've worked for. And they're not scientific, they're not orthogonal in that like one piece of technical debt could fall into 3 different of these categories. The point is to be provocative and start to have you think about where technical debt is lurking in your organization. So the first one is what we call Gordian knots, and these are overly complex implementations. And I think that if you, especially in software, if you leave software to its own and you keep updating it, it gets more and more complex, where it gets very difficult to follow the logic. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who just wrote a bill for the state legislature, and everybody has touched it. And now it's to the point where she reads it and she doesn't even understand what it means anymore. So things tend to evolve to complexity. And you can typically find this for if you're doing exactly spaghetti code. You know, if you're in software, things that have very high psychrometric complexity measures. Yeah, and so one of the things I did want to mention that, you know, if this is a problem at your organization, feel free to chat in it, you know, put your input into the chat. Okay, the second one that we talk about is barnacle ware. And this is when you do a special feature for one particular customer. And, you know, at some point, if the boat is, you know, your main product and the barnacle is a special feature that you do for each customer, you know, a lot of organizations find they have more barnacles than boats. And the symptom of this is when you have configuration management nightmares, right? Like it's really hard to update the core system, and then you've got to propagate the changes to 27 specific examples and things like that. So I wonder how many people have barnacle ware as a problem. Alan and I are always actively working against this one because it's very easy to want to develop a special for every customer every time.
Hi, Jeff.
The third one is glut, and there's all kinds of glut, but one kind of glut, for instance, is just feature glut. It's when you're maintaining a lot of features that nobody is really even using anymore. And the question is, do you even know that whether or not you're, you know, which features those are? Or you might have data glut. You might have a huge database of customers, and some customers probably may not have even interacted with your product for a long period of time. So there can be all kinds of glut in the system. Next is environmental drag. And this is just when your environment slows you down. This is characterized by what we call write-only data that you collect that never gets used, or write-only documents that you create that nobody ever reads. It could be poor meetings, badly run meetings. I mean, meetings are incredibly expensive. It could be approvals that are time-consuming and hard to get. So typically, most organizations have a lot of environmental glut. Environmental
Okay.
glut.
I want to add two quick ones, sorry.
No, please do.
Hey, some people have Jira instances where everybody has to use Jira to log things, etc. And
Mhm.
I've run into multiple places where it takes sometimes 90 seconds to up to 5 minutes to do something. And people are just pulling their hair out of aggravation. I also have organizations where, it's just they have ancient tools. That's all.
The next one is the world has moved on. And this is when either the technology that you're using to create your product or your product itself is based on old technology. So we see that often, we see old COBOL systems that are still being maintained and used out there, or old, sort of client server base when they should be moving to cloud based. So there's a lot of the world has moved on and not staying abreast of the latest technology. Trapdoors. Trapdoors is when you're working along, you go and you do a task and you think it's going to take, a very short amount of time. But then when you get into it, you keep finding this is missing, that is missing. And so it's sort of the result of incomplete implementations. So things that you think should take, 30 minutes end up taking two hours. And it's because there's all these things you have to track down and do. And then the last one is skill debt. And this is when we typically see this in two ways. Either the people that you have don't have the skills you need, or you don't have the people. Those are both skill debt. Now, these are just the 7 types that we came up with. We find them useful in working with most organizations, but every time we work with an organization, they always come up with several of their own. So this is just, like I said, it's just to start. It's a way to get you to start to think about where to find technical debt and really understand the magnitude of the problem. So any questions there before I move on to the 5 keys?
Questions or comments?
Or comments, yeah. Take both. Or other technical debt that you guys have in your organization.
Feel free to raise your hands or to just put something in the chat. While we're waiting for hands, Julia, I want to note 2 things. On the skill debt, often people identify single points of failure for critical parts of the system as an important one as well. Where only in one organization, they have a 70-plus-year-old developer that is maintaining the COBOL system that they're trying to replace, and there's still 2 years to go to replace it. A little bit scary.
Less sensitive projects.
Yes. And I also want to say, we went a little bit quick here. Maybe we'll have more time at the end to talk.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Yoshi.
Yeah. I would add one more, which is the size. The big software is itself the technical debt. In other words, that we cannot handle very well. So perhaps somewhere that we need to talk or put some, the type, size of software.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you. And somebody in the chat said, what about simply having a huge defect backlog? Absolutely, that'll slow you down. Hey, Julia, could you mention the orthogonal, etc. part?
Yeah, I did mention that. I said that these are not orthogonal in that when you identify one type of technical debt, it could fall into several categories. Because again, this is just to help you start to understand where to look for technical debt in your organization. A lot of people think about the complexity, but they don't think about environmental drag. They don't think about glut. They don't think about trapdoors and things like that.
So we really do encourage people to download and take your teams through the technical debt assessment. We have heard from multiple people that they really understood much better the depth of the mud they were running through in a way they didn't before. And they also had fun doing it, believe it or not.
Mhm. It's a great way to get started. Okay, so then the other part of the assessment is walking you through the 5 keys. And the keys are what we found have to be addressed in order to have a successful technical debt effort. And so again, I'm going to walk through these somewhat quickly because they are in the assessment. And we want to talk a lot at the end about challenges you're likely to face and how you might overcome those. So these keys are what we found most organizations have in place that are successful at addressing tech debt. So the first one is system maps. If we say that without a map, you don't know where you are. So developing a system map is more than going through the 7 types of technical debt. It's really looking at your product system and coming up with an approach to how you're going to measure technical debt in the system and then implementing that. So it is a big piece of work. And we have found that a lot of people find value just in having the system map, even without the technical debt overlay. Just having the map of the system can be very useful because oftentimes you don't have a system map in a digestible format. So you need to build that first before you can put the technical debt overlay. But that's really going to help you understand how to invest your time and effort into addressing technical debt, that system map. The second really important key are ROI calculators. And this is really where you, for each technical debt, you sort of estimate what would be involved, what's the effort amount in fixing that technical debt, and then what is the likely return on investment? What would the savings be? And then you can calculate the return on investment. And that really helps you answer the question, what is worth fixing and in what order? So you don't want to treat everything the same. You really want to treat it the same way you treat financial debt. And so I think if I were to ask most people right now, what debt do you have? You'd be able to tell me right away. And that you probably have different strategies. You want to pay off high interest credit card debt before you pay off low interest long-term mortgages, for instance. So the ROI calculators is what helps you make those decisions for the technical debt within your organization. Key 3 is early warning systems. And so we have early warning systems for most aspects of our life. If you're driving your car and you're going to be low on gas, you get a warning. And it gets more intense the less gas that you have in your car. And you need the same thing for technical debt. So some of the systems people have put in place are waiver systems. And this is, I think, getting back to the original notion of technical debt, where when you take it on, you understand and consider that part of the system will need to be refactored. And you don't necessarily, you make a plan so you know when and how you will refactor that system later, because there are lots of good reasons to take on technical debt. Technical debt is not the enemy. Everybody needs to do it sometimes. It's taking it on unconsciously with no plan to address it in the future. And so these early warning systems really prevent you from ending up in that situation. And I think, they're all important, but one of the most important is circle of completeness. And a lot of people, this is what gets missed most of the times. So when you have that ROI calculator, you've estimated what the savings are going to be. What you have to do is when you address that technical debt item, you have to calculate what the actual savings were, and you need to tell management. Alan, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to give that very simple example that we just worked with, just as for an example of how those savings can become invisible if you don't explicitly tell people what the savings was.
Are you talking about the one-day example that yielded? Yes. Okay. Hey, great. So there's a few parts on this. One is really addresses a few things, which is making the technical debt visible in the first place and then making it visible after you fix it as well. So one engineer was complaining to me when we were doing the technical debt deep dive. We have a technical debt deep dive that goes across 10 weeks, 10 modules that really just guide you through a lot of this. I'll mention that more later. And after they had the system map, I was doing one of the keys, which is the ROI calculator. And he was trying to come up with something simple to explain to me. He said, okay, we've been having this problem for 5 years. He said, there's this one part of the system where every time we touch it, it costs 3 or 4 days. I said, wait, you just said that for yourself, it costs 3 or 4 days. What does it really cost for the entire team? We walked it through and he said, oh, for the organization, this is probably 2 effort weeks overall of impact every time we have to touch it. How many times a year do you have to touch it? He went to the data and he found out it was about 25 to 30 times a year over the last 5 years. So that was 3 weeks, 30 times a year, 150 effort weeks. Wow. And I said, that's how long would it take you if this was fixed? He goes, oh, it would take me less than a day. It would take the team week only 2 effort days at most. I said, wow, that's huge ROI. And then I said, how long would it take you to fix this? He goes, let me think. He goes, oh, about a day. And I stared at him. And he goes, oh my God, what have I been doing? So here's the key of part 2, though. I came back in 2 weeks later and I said, did you fix it? He goes, I haven't had the time. Where was this in the Robert Bento? We don't have the time to do it comment. And I said, you don't have the time to invest 1 day to save 150 days a year? He goes, I see your point. Then we got to another one. He went to the next problem, which is management wants features from Tim Haston. He had to fight for it in the next sprint to get this as part of the time he was going to spend because they didn't want this. Then we came back and we figured out how much he saved. It was completely invisible to everybody. Here's the circle of completeness. We had to have him do marketing, which is to show that it did happen 10 more times in the next 5 weeks, actually, and it only costs a day each time, as opposed to all of that completely shutting down the team. Once they showed the savings, things began to change. Did I pick the right story?
Yeah, and I just think that some things are better explained with a story than with anything
Yeah.
else. So this is really, circle of completeness is just critical. And it's the thing that gets missed very, very often.
And Matt put in a great, too busy chopping down trees with an axe to talk to the chainsaw salesman.
Right. And Covey talks about this a lot,
Yeah.
keeping the
Yeah.
lawnmower sharp and.
Yeah, but he talked about sharpening the axe. This guy's good. He said, why do I go buy a chainsaw?
Yes.
So.
And so that's the last key is being able to strike a perfect balance between investing in technical debt and in new features, because management is right. New features are what are going to bring the money into the organization. And that's why you accumulate in the first place, is because of revenue goals. And so you have to be able to have that feedback to know what you're actually saving and what you're likely to save, to be able to strike that perfect balance. And the reality of the situation is that in every organization, situations are very dynamic. Revenue goals change, the customer landscape changes. And so you're constantly having to rebalance your investment in going faster, addressing technical debt, with your investment in developing more value directly for your customers. And so without the previous keys, you really can't make an informed, objective decisions about it. You're just guessing, or you're just accumulating more and more debt without realizing it. And one of the things that people always talk about when we do our tech debt deep dives is how much they've just been coping with things. They just cope with it. They just know that this is hard to deal with. It never occurs to them to go and fix it. It's just you get this mentality with, you just deal with it. And so part of, that's why the assessment is so important, because it's really that first step in acknowledging and understanding what is tech debt costing your organization. So any questions on the 5 keys before we move on?
So I'm gonna, go ahead, Yoshi.
No, these 5 keys talks about us. In other words, that we must have the system maps and so on. So these are the requirement for us to manage software.
Yes,
That's
when we're talking about software intensive systems,
Yes. Okay.
we find software intensive systems are not successful in crushing technical debt unless they have all 5 keys.
Mhm.
But we also find, we talk a lot about tech debt and purely software systems. When we talk to hardware engineers, they jump right on board and say they have technical debt as well, overly complex implementations, et cetera. So they have often the same set of problems.
Yes, it's really any high-tech development.
Mhm.
Okay. I think we should move on.
Okay.
So for the ROI calculator, what are the parameters you put into it? Alan, you have an example of the ROI calculator at the end, so I think we can cover that question then.
Yeah, actually, could you go to the first one to give all 5 keys at once?
Yes.
Because I wanted to sort of wrap this section up with an example. Hey, for the RO calculator, I will answer that indirectly. And Julia and I are happy to meet with people if they want any more detail later. We might not have enough time to cover it completely. But here, I just want to say these are the 5 keys fit together. I was just talking to
Sorry.
a new client. And became a new client based on this question. He was being very proud of how they're handling technical debt. And he said, we have 15% of every sprint dedicated to technical debt. And I said, how do you know which parts of technical debt to put in that 15%? And his answer was, I don't know. I guess it's based on what's most annoying. And I said, and I really encouraged them to take the technical debt deep dive, because the ROI calculator, which was just asked about, is critical. What you have to look at, cyclomatic complexity is useful, for example, but the key is how much time is being lost each time. And sometimes the technical debt calculator could be infinite, because sometimes systems fall off the technical debt cliff. Because, if you're still using Windows 95, you've already fallen off the cliff years ago. By the way, the reason I bring that up is I just found somebody's running an emulator on an ancient operating system to keep the system still going. The emulator will eventually die too. They fell off the cliff and they got a net, but the net has holes in it. So we got to be very careful on how we look at this. I hope that helped, Matt. We can talk more later. Let me go to the challenges. And I have how many minutes left, Julia? About 10?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to add one last thing very quickly. Our June Tech Talk speaker will be Herb Krasner, and he's has written a 2022 report on the state of software, and he lists technical debt as the #1 issue facing most organizations at this point.
Oh, absolutely. So, hey, challenges. A lot of these challenges came up in the opening chat with people talking and people writing things in. The assessment's really only the first step. I really encourage you to take your teams through it. You'll find it's useful. What we get worried about is some teams think they're done when they did that, but they're not done, because there is challenges ahead. The culture that created technical debt is still there. Like I told you in the story, the individual that knew he could fix this in one day and had been dealing with it for 5 years didn't feel like he had the time to deal with it. And he put up with it. He coped with it. 2, he had to fight for it in the sprint to get that one day in there, even though they're that great of savings. When they went through the technical debt drive, they fixed that because we got everybody in the organization to understand, overcome those barriers. You need to know where to start. There has to be effective communications between management and engineering. What management hears when you talk about technical debt is whining. And they have told me that. And what engineers hear when the management says you have to go faster is we as engineers hear whining. We have to translate the whining into economic benefit, into speed, and into saving the spirit of the teams. All of those are important. If you don't have the data or know how to get the data, you need help. If you have schedule pressure that is overwhelming the need to take a pit stop to get faster, to talk to the chainsaw salesman, you need help. You need to create the space to go faster. And you have to move improvement from being invisible to visible. Next slide, Julia. What can you do? Well, one is, you know these things. I have talked to many people in this call before, and I'd like to meet everybody else. You know that you have to build management sponsorship. And we do that by the way I'm talking about. Move from technical debt being a problem to solving technical debt to be the solution to going faster. Define goals. The first thing we ask in the technical debt assessment is, what are your goals? If you solve this, what are you going to do? People struggle to answer that. Go through the struggle. Find out what your goals are. Establish a team with a proper representation and effective roles to do this. And leave the team to address the 5 keys. What we do in the technical debt deep dive, for example, we do this either publicly or for organization specific. The one we just finished, there was 7 people on the team representing over 100 engineers, all the different parts. They would go back to their individual teams with our guidance, and they would work with the whole teams. So this technical debt deep dive, by the time they were done, every team had a map. Every team had done technical debt calculators on their top 5. They were able to get them into the sprints with data. One of the teams is actually shutting down for 6 weeks to gain 2 years every year. But they got management signed up to, shut down the team. We have a lot to do and we want that gain. It just amazing. So you often need help, and those are the keys, and we can help you. What should you do? Oh, and get expert help. That's always true. I have found you can do these things on your own, but I have found over and over again, just myself and Julia and many people I work with, that if you really want to do something that's important and you want to get better fast, hire an expert to help you. I do it all the time still. Where do you get the expert help from? Well, Exceptional Difference is one example of where you can get help from. Thank you for that setup, Tim. How can we help? And also, by the way, if we can't help you, we know who to point you to. We also know that, so we're happy to talk to you. Technical debt deep dive. Here's an example from an org specific one. These are just all the examples of ROI they got when they did their technical debt calculators. The 18% one was very low, you see, but they still tackled it because it was also very annoying. So there's some times where you tackle something because it is annoying, but they had the data to know that it was absolutely a gain. Anything you want to say about this slide, Julie? I think it's just great data.
Well, no, I think that, I think one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is what happens if you don't address the technical debt. And I think you started to allude to it, in your in the summary of the 5 keys, but a lot of people don't realize that you eventually will get to a cliff where your ability to enhance and maintain your system gets so cumbersome that you have to take action. And if you wait until that point, it's not pretty. There's no easy way out of there. You really limit the options of how you can address that tech and service your customers at the same time. And so there is a tech debt cliff looming. And so, that's why the first step is really understanding and building that map so you can understand what's likely to happen. And I think one of the things that really helps with expert help is being able to give the engineers the language that they need to speak and consult effectively with management, to get them out of that whining stage, to really understand what are the economics realities of technical debt. What is it really costing the organization? Because that's what management cares about most, is the bottom line. And a lot of engineers just need help understanding how to quantify that.
Engineers and managers. I'll
Yes.
say it's a struggle in most places to get people think ROI. We're now doing work with some financial organizations, and they eat this up quickly. And they are considered backwards in the world of technology often. In this one, they're getting it quickly. They still want help, but I'm finding that interesting. We still have to help them translate their technical debt into ROI. But once they got that, we got management on board. We often help people at the management levels to understand what we mean by the ROI and how it helps them go faster. So I love this. One of the executives we worked with said, I finally get it, Alan. I finally get it. This team of 10, I basically have 2 more highly talented people on the team, and I didn't have to hire anyone. They were already there. And it's just delightful to see people getting it. And what she didn't know is later she found out she had actually more than that, because there's other teams that weren't addressing technical debt, and they were having people leave and joining this other team because they wanted to be part of a team that got it. Okay.
2 more
I think we're
people with no onboarding as well.
yeah, no onboarding, etc. No
getting them up to
recruiting
speed.
fees.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Julie, I think we're ready for the Q&A part, are we?
Yes, I think we are.
Excellent. Let's get people back into the hot seats here. Questions, comments. What are you doing in your organizations about this?
What have you tried? What's worked? What hasn't?
Uh-oh.
Hello,
I can.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just saying, uh-oh, nobody wants to talk. Yoshi, go ahead.
Well, okay. First of all, that maybe the 7 types items. That sounds like software is bad because we cannot handle well. But I believe from the software position that, oh, you people are bad. You made me, you made me complex or whatever. It's not my fault. So
Yes.
that one fact there is that the old software is working. Nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So that view makes this technical depth presentation is a little bit more complicated. So
Yes.
I think say we need to get back to what is a programming language itself, or the compiler, okay? Or you know, the preprocessor, whatever, those the languages must tell us that, okay, you built that, you know, like whatever the nuts in this component or something, right? That is one thing. Another thing is that the tool must be much more capable to handle technical depths. In other words, that the error is always made by people,
Mhm.
not the software. Okay, and also I have one comment about the culture. Well, very few engineers trying to make software simple. But in average, they may pay some attention to make software simple, but not perfect. Okay, which is very strong, as a requirement that I don't know that the human being can answer for that, but the problem is there.
Right.
So those are the things that I thought that you know, some view may help.
Right.
New view may help us to understand what is the problem with the software. So my feeling is that the software is not nothing wrong with it, but we are wrong most of this problem. So that's how the 5 key items is very important for us to, you know, to make things work. I mean, to make software work.
Yeah. So Yoshi, let me just make a couple of points quickly, and I'm gonna let Alan take on a couple of questions in the chat. But one thing I think that you bring up that's really important is that, you know, and this is where it helps to have outside help, is that you really don't want to get into the blame game and look backwards for technical debt. You know, it's important to understand how it got there so you can understand how to prevent it. But it's not a blame thing. You know, there's lots of times when you have to take on technical debt. And so the whole point is to look at it sort of same as a financial model, not worry about how did my $1 do that I invested, you know, previously, but if I have $1, where's the best place to invest it now? And so now I'm going to let Alan answer some of the questions that were in the chat.
Hey, if people can look at the chat, there's actually 2 or 3 questions that are kind of related. How do you estimate days saved? And that goes on to say, if you're training people, how can you quantify the spin up time on those people? And how do you, it takes X% longer to make changes to that area of the code. It feels like a swag, hard to defend. All of these things are true. It is hard. But the biggest problem that I have found with doing hundreds of these now is that engineers get in their way because they want precision. Because we are engineers, we want a precise, very accurate answer. And what I have found is working with people, we are pretty good at doing estimates. And if we break the estimates into a bit of detail, we can justify them. For example, in the one I gave you where, you know, it was 3 weeks, I had to walk him through the example. You know, I gave you the shorthand answers. It took about an hour and a half to get through the entire tech debt calculator for that example. I said, okay, when you touch this part of the system where you said, how long does it take you? He goes, about a day. I said, let's break it down. Is it a day or more than a day? So what's the first thing you have to do? Oh, I have to do some research about this. I have to refresh myself on this part of the code because it's complicated and stupid. I spend some time whining to other people about it, et cetera, et cetera. And then I said, what about the other people that are impacted? Oh, I always have somebody inspected, and I usually get 2 or 3 people to inspect it because there's other parts of the system that might break if I touch this. Okay, how long does that take? So I break it in the details. And then for how much time is, so anyway, I break it into detail, and I do the same thing for fixing it. How long will it take to fix it? And I do a lot of other things too, because some of the other stuff we do is how do we know it's not going to regress later? How do we prevent that? We talk about that too. Then for the time saved, how do we show it? Again, we come back and we actually say, we're going to track the time for how long it's taking us to fix these things next time around. And we track how long approximately it takes. We end up making this invisible, visible very quickly. The first sale is always to yourself. And I find that once the engineer is convinced, they have an easy time convincing their product owners, their release managers, their managers that fixing this will save a lot of time. And every time you come back with a circle of completeness that shows how much you saved, people get addicted to going faster. I hope that helped answer the question. And again, if you want to join us in a one-on-one, just let us know, send us an email, and we'll set up some time with you. How do you estimate days saved? Thank you, Tim. So I just said how much time it cost you. What you want to do is, once you say if it's fixed, how long will it take to touch that piece of code the next time? And what we find is you want to look at the whole cost. It's not just the individual engineer, it's really the cost of the whole organization. Because with technical debt, usually a lot of the cost is well beyond the individual engineer, because it also is regression testing and many other things.
Yeah, one other point that I want to make, that so much of it is about mindset, because what happens is that right now everybody's coping with technical debt. They just cope with things. It never occurs to them to even start thinking in terms of ROI. Wow, if I address this, how much time would it save? And they actually know a lot more than they think they do. And it's just because they're not in the mindset of thinking that way. And like Alan says, like flipping a switch. Once you sort of change the mindset and you start thinking that way, they start finding savings everywhere. Because the whole paradox is that the culture is the reason why the organization is building technical debt unconsciously. Until you sort of start to understand the cultural issues, you're sort of doomed to repeat it. And so we do have other things where we talk more about how do you create a culture of excellence, so that you have a culture where everybody's mindset has been changed.
So
We have just a few minutes left.
yeah, I know. I have 2 others to wrap that up. First, I want to recognize what Bob Lee said. Outsourcing is a key competency. That is a technical debt. Absolutely. We could do a whole talk on the stupidities of that. So
But it's also a great tool when you need it.
when you need it. The key is, though, getting rid of your key IP is where I see mistakes being made. We need to do this really critical thing for our company. We don't have time. So instead of putting their key people on and outsources and the detailed stuff they're doing, they outsource the IP. Dumb. Okay, back to this. I want to remind you 2 things. One is, please don't be afraid to set up time with us. We're happy to talk to you and help. We can do a little bit of free, and maybe we can figure out some way we can help you sell your management and how we can help. 2 is, I just want to remind people of this. The first technical debt calculators I do in any organization take an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours or more before people get it. After we do 4 or 5 of them, people are cranking out tech data calculators in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's a new muscle. It's a new skill. It's a new way to think. And they're cranking these out with high confidence. And also it has to go together with your system map, where you see what areas are beautiful green, what areas are nice and yellow, and where you have cliffs, redness, If you have that, it helps you with the tech debt calculators as well. If you have that backed up with cyclomatic complexity max, it helps as well. All the keys fit together. Thank you for your questions. We love doing this talk. This is always so exciting. Back to you, Julia.
Okay, just one thing, there was another thing about, tracking small things. I just want to make a point that, yes, sometimes you will overestimate the savings, sometimes you will underestimate the savings, but generally the over and the underestimates are going to even out. So even though while you might not be exactly right on one, if you look over the course of a year, you're probably going to be pretty close to the ROI that you expect. And if you have a lot of bias one way or another, that's a different problem. You need to understand it and address that separately.
And
So
thus far, nobody has found they made things worse. It has always made things better.
right, but again, the whole one of the things we want to emphasize is that it's more than just developing the calculator. You really need to develop the team. There's a lot of things that you need to consider to address it fully, so you don't just take on tech debt on your tech debt effort. So it's kind of like you've got to break out of that cycle. Okay. So, closing notes, if you want to, share with us what you learned or what you're looking forward to, or if you want to reach out, you can direct chat us, and if you want us to contact you. But we want to thank everybody. We like to end with a quote. Chains are the habit too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. And that really, I think, sums up technical debt in one